Bannons Populists, once a movement, keep him at arm's length. Paris. Stephen K. Bannon, the millionaire former Trump advisor turned rabble-rouser of European populists, settled into a plush set of rooms this week in Paris at the Bristol Hotel, where suites run up to $32,000 a night. An unopened bottle of champagne in front of him, he presented himself as a man of the people and promoted Europe's right-wing and populist parties even as the most important election in Europe, he said in an interview on Thursday. For months, Mr. Bannon has traveled around Europe, presenting himself as the linchpin of a populist revolution. But he was in Paris. That was good, because they no longer seemed to want his help, either. All week in Paris, Mr. Bannon was hissed at by enemies, dominated the airwaves and caused an eruption in the French political class for meddling in the country's affairs. He was kept at arm's length. These elections, taking place from Thursday to Sunday, were the big moment when Mr. Bannon predicted that his assembled forces would storm the barricades of the European Union bureaucracy. Except that now that it has arrived, many of them seem to have moved on without him. Mr. Bannon's presence in France had become so toxic that Ms. Le Pen, the leader of the former National Front, rebranded as the National Rally, did not meet him. She told the French, for a year, in often similarly lush hotels across Europe in Italy, Britain, Hungary, the Czech Republic Mr. Bannon had promised polling for his far-right fellow travelers. He promised to, all I am trying to be, Mr. Bannon said in a March interview in the Hotel Grand Savoia in Milan, is the infrastructure, globally, for the global populist movement. But in the home stretch before the elections, a distance began to grow. This month, in many ways, it seemed a manifestation of the movement Mr. Bannon had been prophesizing in his endless media scrums. But Mr. Bannon, we don't need him, divided by R.G. Muffen, a leader of the far-right Alternative for Germany party, said after the rally. The reasons Mr. Bannon is not needed now have much to do with the contradictions of his Nationalist Internationale, as critics call his movement. From the start it was an incongruous effort by an outsider to stitch together far-right nationalists who all give pride of place to their own countries. Beyond watering, but his populists have also quickly internalized Mr. Bannon's most important lesson that media attention creates its own political momentum. And for a while, he showered it on the European populists, and in return they gave him a new battlefield, one where he was not a casualty he had been fired by President Trump but a player, and where he could get more press for himself. I am just an American in Paris, Mr. Bannon said as he held court at the Bristol, grinning at the obvious understatement. He declined to reveal how much he had paid for his set of rooms, denied that it contradicted his Tribune of the People persona, and insisted that the looks was really all about efficiency. Yet the stormy reaction to Mr. Bannon's presence in Paris this week spoke volumes about a delicate moment he has helped create in America's relations with Europe generally, and with France especially. The presidency of Mr. Trump, his former boss who remains deeply unpopular in France, has infused the old alliance with insecurity and bitterness. Much of the ruckus that accompanied Mr. Bannon this week was based on a mutual misunderstanding. His lack of French gives him a sometimes shaky comprehension of local political life, and the French often have an equally fantastic notion of American politics. Still, it all seemed a far cry from Mr. Bannon's oft-stated grand design to engineer the Federation of Europe's far right. Even he barely the idea of my being here as some kind of puppet master, it's just not true, he said. I don't talk to the. Yet if Mr. Bannon's goals were disruption and attention, he had richly succeeded, though possibly at the expense of his erstwhile far-right allies. President Emmanuel Macron and the philosopher Bernard-Henri Levy denounced him by name, which also served as a slight to Ms. Le Pen, and 5 current and former presidents of the French Parliament condemning his unwanted meddling. to fight a Europe held responsible for all of our woes, we're supposed to follow the orders delivered from a suite at a luxurious Paris hotel by a shadowy advisor to Donald Trump, recycled as a freelance lobbyist for the Populist International, they wrote. The nation, united, will not take orders, they said. Trying to drum up support for his own forces, Mr. Macron told local journalists that he saw for the first time connivance between the nationalists and foreign interests, whose goal is dismantling Europe. Lobbyists like Mr. Bannon, close to the American executive, are saying it, he said. In fact, the far right's ties to Mr. Bannon had handed Mr. Macron a golden opportunity to depict Ms. Le Pen's party as controlled by foreigners. That is an odd and bold. There is a strong, persistent anti-American vein, said Jean-Yves Camus, an expert on far-right movements at the Fondation Jean-Jaurès Research Institute in Paris. And a great way to. Mr. Lvy, for his part, stood on the steps of the Lice Palace after a lunch with President Macron, declaring himself upset to see Europe corrupted from the inside by little populist thugs manipulated by Mr. Bannon. Mr. Bannon chuckled. French guys throw. The disdain is strictly mutual. Mr. Bannon Mr. Macron, he said, is a product of the system, the globalist system of free-moving capital that had betrayed working-class voters, valiantly championed by Mr. Trump, in Mr. Bannon's restless farrago. As for himself, I totally identify with the Gilets jaunes, Mr. Bannon said, referring to the whose often violent demonstrations over low wages and diminished expectations rocked Mr. Macron's presidency for 6 months. Mr. Bannon seemed to overlook the fact that the Yellow Vests have destroyed and vandalized symbols of excessive wealth in the heart of the capital. Had they been allowed, Adam Nossiter reported from Paris, and Jason Horowitz from Rome.
Raindrop, drop top smoking, no cooking the hot pot. Fucking on your bitch, yeah, that. Looking up, open the park, pot.